morning.
When do you want to wait a few more minutes?
Sure.
I mean, I don't. You have probably take a long time. I mean, a lot of questions and a lot of stuff to cover, right?
Yeah, I ran through it last night. Whoa. I ran through it last night. It was 45 minutes, so I'll try and... Oh my goodness. I'll speed through other parts of it.
I'd like to share something with you.
Oh, great.
Something I witnessed.
Ooh. Okay, thank you.
Met your friend Stephanie out in the day. She was there and I helped her. She was trying to carry some books to you and just going. And she's a dear lady and she's going to be confirmed next Sunday. She's just 12-year-old. She told me she showed her friends. Yeah, but she didn't look. She looked like that. She looked different to me this morning. Looking forward to hearing you.
Thank you. Oh, I'm not... Here, I'll back away since I have the I have the lavalier on. Sure. I don't know if you want to...
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
Yeah, what?
Ooh, that was loud.
Good morning. Okay.
Good morning.
Why don't we just go ahead and start? Okay, I need to...
Here.
Good morning, everyone. We're going to begin here. We have Sarah Elizabeth has 45 minutes of presentation, and we want to have a few minutes for questions. So we're going to get started right now. Okay, the Lord be with you. Let us pray. Gracious and loving God, you have gathered us in community to seek to better know you and to serve you. Open our eyes, our ears, our minds, and our hearts to a closer look at the vastness of your mystery. And today we will explore some of that vastness with Sarah Elizabeth. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. All right. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here on this first day of June. As Kit mentioned, I ran through this yesterday, and I thought I hadn't put that much stuff in here, and it was almost 47 minutes. So I'm going to try and go through some of the stuff up front very quickly so we have plenty of time for questions. So this is the second part of a forum I gave back in February, which is a sort of a recap of an experience that I had last year. For folks who weren't at the first part, last year from July 22nd to September 30th, I was simulating being an astronaut on Mars. And so when I talk about the Mars experience or the habitat or Hera, it all means the same thing. And so in the first part of the forum, or I guess the first forum I gave back in February, was sort of a higher level overview of what exactly the experience was, what it included, what we did, what the kind of research was. And I started at the end to go into a little bit more of faith in the habitat, kind of how you deal with living in that environment. And so this one kind of picks up where that left off. And my hope is to go much more into that and to not talk as much about the basic stuff. Although, of course, if you guys have questions about that, I'm happy to talk about that as well. So really quickly, just as a reminder, what is Hera? It's human testing at NASA. So it stands for the Human Exploration Research Analog. It's a 650 square foot habitat that is designed to mimic what it might be like to live on Mars or to explore some remote part of our solar system. You have 4 people who are living together in this habitat for 45 days. You have no connectivity to the outside world, which sometimes honestly is probably a good thing. But you can't check your email, you can't check social media, you can't watch the French Open, which you guys aren't doing right now this morning anyway. So no connectivity to the outside world, there's no refrigeration, so that gets into the food aspect, and then you don't get to go outside either. So this is what it looks like. It's very small. Cleaver Hall, which is what we are in right now, according to my rough approximation using Google Earth, is about 6,600 square feet. So this habitat is a tenth of the size of this building, and you're in that for 45 days. So that's the really quick overview of what it is. Now we're going to jump into the good stuff. So there was a question at the very end last time about how do you deal with, the stress of living in this environment, or the anxiety, the isolation. You're doing something that's really extreme, that's very unusual, and how do you handle that? I went back through and was looking at pictures and rereading my journal. We'll talk about that in more detail. And I sort of came up with 6 different things that immediately jumped out at me. Of course, there are other coping mechanisms as well. And so I'll walk through these in varying degrees of thoroughness. So first is a sense of humor, looking on the bright side, being optimistic. This was my least favorite meal in the habitat. You probably can't tell it from the smile on my face. But I don't know how easy it is to see, but I defied years of teaching from my mother and my grandmothers about manners, and I played with my food, and I made it into a face. So there were these awful beet noodles and this weird chicken thing that we had to eat. So I made a face out of the meal that I did not enjoy eating, so that was fun. We grew lettuce in the habitat, but we weren't allowed to eat it. And so periodically we would have to harvest this lettuce for certain experiments, and so you would cut it. And I don't want to treat addiction lightly, but it was interesting to me. I didn't realize that lettuce had a smell, but it does when you're not around anything fresh or anything green. So we would cut the lettuce, and as you would move it sort of from the growing area to the bags, you'd kind of run it under your nose and kind of huff it and sniff it a little bit and be like, ah, yes, nature, fresh things. Or you could also use it to make bunny ears. We teased each other, pretended we were torturing each other, gave different kinds of bunny ears. There were lots of things that we had to wear. We wore multiple watches. I had a glucose sensor on. We periodically would wear this heart rate monitor. We had a recorder listening to everything we said. We were watched by cameras. So we were monitored in various fashions 24/7, which was something that I wasn't as excited about. And so we called them the terrible wearables. So again, just trying to make do with what you have. The second thing, celebrating the little things. Wearing Hawaiian shirts is a really big deal at Johnson Space Center on Fridays. You sort of celebrate the end of your work week. And as it happened, National Hawaiian Shirt Day occurred when we were in the habitat. So we all got to celebrate that together, wearing our Hawaiian shirts. We watched the movie The Martian when we were on Mars, so that was fun. For those who don't know me, I'm from Kansas. I've mentioned that in past forums. I'm very proud to be from Kansas, and I'm a very big sports fan, especially of my hometown teams. And so it's probably hard to see in the picture, but this is me doing some geology sampling and analysis. We had collected samples from the surface of Mars and had put them in little boxes. And it turned out that the samples I was analyzing, it was sample K and sample U. So I found a way to channel my inner Jayhawk even all the way on Mars. This is what my bunk looks like. Obviously, again, you can tell, not shy about where I'm from. But the point of this picture actually is that I brought a pillow from home with me. Ahead of time, they gave us a packing list that told us what we could and couldn't bring. You couldn't bring anything that connected to the internet, so you couldn't bring, an iPad, you couldn't bring a Kindle. I had to dredge up my old iPod circa like 2010. Everyone has made fun of me for hanging on to it. Joke was on them. It was useful for this experience. And they also recommended bringing a pillow. I was the only one who did. I don't know if everyone else thought they were too cool for it or didn't think they would need it, but it ended up being a nice little luxury for me that I really enjoyed having every night. And I had my flannel pillowcases that I like to use, so that was a little victory, little luxury at night. Connecting back home and connecting to your broader community is also a very important aspect when you're dealing with stress and with extreme environments. So the NFL season started when I was in the habitat. At the time, reigning Super Bowl champions, the Kansas City Chiefs, were hosting the Baltimore Ravens. So I celebrated that with the flag, and I made a little video that I'm not sharing here just for time. I mentioned this in the last forum as well. One of the biggest things for me that helped me navigate this whole experience was having letters from friends and family. The picture on the left is one I didn't have last time, and it was really fun. All of the kids here in Sunday school, right before I left, they all wrote cards for me. And so they put them in an envelope, and they told me to open them once I got to Mars, and so I did that. And I think I shared a video of me getting ready to open them the last time I gave this form, and this is what the letters actually looked like. The whole idea for that actually was just kind of a chance conversation that I had with a friend who recommended, hey, you should, maybe ask, your family to write you some letters when you're in the habitat. And so I did, and then I mentioned it kind of in an offhanded way, here as well, and then I was just blown away by the amount of support that I received from everyone. I had over 100 letters. Over a third of them were from people in this parish, in this congregation. Yes, you all deserve a round of applause. And so it was incredibly meaningful for me to know that many people were invested in me, were supporting me, were thinking about me, praying for me. And so it was really interesting, and something I found when I was scrolling through my journal yesterday, actually, I wrote, I think this whole experience is easier on us than our families. We know what we're doing, we know how we're feeling, and we're really very busy. It's harder for those who are left behind. I feel like I could stay in here longer than 45 days and it wouldn't be that much harder, but I do think it would be harder on my family. And so it reminded me of an experience that we as a crew had before we started the actual living in the habitat part. I was in Houston for about 3 months because you had some training, the actual isolation part, and then the debrief on the back end. And on the front end, the 6 of us went to something called, I think, like Explore ISS, something like that. And it was an opportunity for you to walk through the ISS in 3D. The ISS is the International Space Station, which is, of course, orbiting the Earth, has been for over 20 years, and we have humans living and working in space on the ISS right now. And so it was this really cool experience where you could don a headset and walk around and see what it's like to be on the ISS. And it was crazy because you could look down and you saw the Earth moving under your feet like you were flying over it. So it was an incredibly cool experience, and you were able to stop in certain places, and different astronauts would sort of have quick little, on-camera interviews. And one of the astronauts, who happened to be from Kansas, it was just a fun coincidence, his name is Nick Hague. His comment essentially was that when you become an astronaut, it doesn't just impact you. It impacts your entire support system. And there are people in your life who maybe didn't sign up for this, but they love you, so they figure out how to deal with it anyway. And that, to obviously a smaller degree, is sort of how this experience happened. Last year, calendar year 2024, my parents both had milestone birthdays. I won't say what they are, but they had also been married for 40 years. So it was a really big year for my parents, for our family, for lots of things, and we had all these grand plans to all be together to celebrate all those milestones. And then I had to raise my hand in late May and say, about all of those plans we were all going to do together, not going to be available. And so, that's one of the things that they had to deal with and kind of sacrifice to support me when I was going through this experience, which I'm very grateful for. I talked about connecting back home, which is very valuable, but that's kind of a one-way street. I can read letters from people back at home, but I'm not communicating with them daily. I can't just call them up on the phone and say, gosh, I'm really frustrated today. And so that's when connecting with the crew internally becomes very important as well. And so this photo you see here, we had a 36-hour sleep deprivation study near the end of the mission. So you wake up at 7 o'clock on Friday morning, you work all day Friday, all night Friday night, all day Saturday, and then you go to bed at 7 o'clock on Saturday night. So this was after something we had done in the middle of the night. If you look at the clock, up here behind his head it says 3:01. That's 3:01 in the morning. So we had just done this big team-wide exercise at 3 o'clock in the morning. You can see one of our teammates isn't really feeling being awake at 3 o'clock in the morning, so the other two of us in this picture, we're trying to rally him, having sing-alongs, dance parties, all those things. Later on in the sleep deprivation studies, I had some difficulties with a blood draw, and so that was bumming me out, so then they had to help me through that part of the sleep dep experience. So it's really important to lean and support on each other. This was our very first night in the habitat. We're fresh, we're doe-eyed, whatever the expression is. We don't know what's in store. We like each other. We're happy to be there. It's still true halfway through when we were on Mars. So we were still very close, arguably, closer than we were at the very beginning. And then at the very end, it took us 45 days to figure out how to take a non-selfie group photo. So this is at the very end of the mission, and you can tell, we're still good friends. We celebrated together. My family made fun of me because as soon as we ended the mission, we all still went out to go get dinner together. And my parents said, "You haven't spent enough time with each other?" And I said, "Well, we all wanted steaks and we all wanted mashed potatoes, and it just made sense to go do that and share that experience together." It was nice. The fifth thing, prayer and faith, was very important for me as well, dealing with this whole experience. I mentioned last time that I did communion every week that I was in there. I received consecrated hosts from the church, which was excellent. So I did communion on Mars. So I don't know if I'm the first person who can say that or not, but that was really fun. I made a joke last time, and someone had asked, how did others perceive or react to your faith and you praying and doing these things in the habitat? And everyone knew that was going to happen beforehand. I had shared that, not in like a, "Look at me, I'm going to be doing church and I'm better than you" way, but just as a comment, "Hey, this is something important to me, I'm going to be doing it just so you're aware," I guess, because not all people have good experiences with religion. And everybody was super supportive about it. They asked, the first week when I said I would be doing, church and doing communion, they asked if I needed any privacy. They asked if there was anything that they could do to help me out, which I really appreciated. And I said, "Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate the kindness and the thoughtfulness. You guys are just fine. I'll sit here in the corner and do my communion while you guys do your brain scans." And so this is a picture of what that looked like. So I'm in one corner in my camp chair doing communion. You see my feet on the center elevator column, and the other two crewmates are doing their brain scans. So, science, religion, all living happily right there on L2 in the habitat. And that's what that corner actually looks like. I mentioned this last time, but it was so important, I'm just reiterating it here. This was a book that Reese Riley gifted me, Praying the Dark Hours, written by Jim Cotter. It's actually a combination of two books that were combined and then republished. And it has a short little reading for every day of the calendar year, and then a longer nightly prayer routine for every day of the week. And so every day, or I tried every day, I wasn't always successful, but I tried every day to do one or the other or both. And so it was also interesting to me that on consecutive Tuesdays, for example, I was still working through the same Tuesday nightly prayer routine, but something new would pop out to me each time I went through that routine. One of the prayers in particular that was really valuable for me when I was trying to go to sleep at night and my mind was still racing with everything I'd done that day, with what might be happening back home that I wasn't aware of, is the one that you see on the screen here. It says, "Inspire me while waking, restore me while sleeping, that awake in the night I may watch with Christ, and asleep may rest in your peace." So that was very valuable for me and helped center me when my mind was running through all sorts of things at night. And then underneath that, in smaller font, I don't know why I made it so small, is a snippet of Psalm 118 that everyone here, I'm sure, is very familiar with. And I can't remember if someone wrote this to me in a letter, if I found it in the Book of Common Prayer, or if it just occurred to me. But I had this on a sticky note in my desk area. It says, "This is the day that the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it." And that kind of gets into something I'll talk about later, but the idea of being present in the moment, remembering that you are doing something now today that you will never be able to do again. And so try not to obsess about the past, worry about mistakes that you've made before that you can't fix anyway. Don't worry about the future. Don't what if yourself to death with what might be coming, with what might be going on at home. Be present in this moment. Rejoice in the experience that you're living right now. And then the last thing that was very valuable for me was journaling. I've always wanted to be someone who journals, but I'm not. My dad is actually a very good journaler, and it's really fun. If we have a question or if we're trying to settle a debate about something that happened on a family vacation 15 years ago, he can go to volume 7, page 1523 and pull up, the top 10 songs from our 6-week road trip in the summer of 2001. He has a running list of the earliest walnut to fall from the walnut tree into our front yard. They are his arch nemesis. When my sister and I were little, we were paid a penny a walnut to pick them up off the front lawn. That was how we earned our Christmas money. Then we'd go to the dollar store and spend it all on, erasers and pencils we didn't need. So I've always wanted to be someone who documents and journals, but, it's easy to come up with excuses. I'm too busy, I'm too tired, my life isn't interesting, or I don't know. It's very easy to come up with reasons to not do this. And so it was very important to me that I make an effort to document what was going on, just because I knew that other people would have questions about what I'd experienced, but I also knew that so much was going to happen and there was no way that I was going to remember it. So initially I hoped at a bare minimum it would be sort of a recitation of facts. Here's what I did today. Here's what I ate today. Here's why I'm never going to eat it again. Stuff like that. And I had hoped ahead of time that it would also morph into, how I'm feeling about these things, how I'm getting along with my crewmates. Was today a good day? Was it a bad day? That sort of kind of next level. I didn't go into it intending to write the next philosophical treatise. That seemed like way too much pressure to put on myself for someone who barely journals at all. And it ended up being something I was doing probably at least an hour a day, just because there was so much to write down, and there were so many things that I was thinking about and feeling. One of the things that was very interesting, because you're not connected to the rest of the world, everything that you do, or at least I felt that everything I was doing was very intentional. And so when I'm sitting down to read a book, it's because I'm not supposed to be doing anything else. I have free time. I don't need to be worrying about doing laundry. I don't need to be worrying about, getting back to that email that someone wrote me. I don't need to worry about making a grocery list to figure out what I'm going to cook for dinner for the next week. When I have time on my schedule to relax, the only thing I need to do is relax, which is actually a very nice feeling, because that's very rare out here. There's always something else you could be doing. There's always, some drawer you could be cleaning out, some text you could get back to, some article that you flagged to read later. And so there were lots of things that I was thinking and trying to write down, which is why I ended up doing so much of this. I opened it at random yesterday and came across something really funny that's on the next chart. And when I was trying to figure out what date I wrote that on, I flipped back a couple pages and realized I'd written it on Mission Day 28. And it was really interesting to me how that journal entry initially unfolded. I've already probably made it clear I'm not a journaler. So it's very rare that I've ever gone back to read a journal, and I have never shared anything I've written in a journal with anyone else. So this is a unique experience for me to share with you what I was feeling in the Habitat in my exact words as they were written in my journal. So the very first comment that I wrote on Mission Day 28 says, "Gah! I'm grouchy and frustrated." And then I wrote a bunch of details about why that I'm not going to share to preserve the integrity of the science. But I'm grouchy and frustrated. And then I said, "I'm letting myself be grumpy and grouchy now and using this as an outlet so I can feel it and then let it go." And so for me, actually, that's a really big deal. I'm not someone who historically, certainly if you talk to my family, who has always dealt with their emotions in the most productive of ways. When I was little, if my sister did something that bothered me, I wouldn't necessarily do anything about it in the moment. I would let it build and fester, and then 2 weeks later I would break down in tears, and nobody knew why. And I was afraid of the movie Pocahontas, and my parents didn't know that until I was in college. So I didn't always express negative emotions very effectively or productively as a kid. And so it was a big deal for me to find a better way to handle that, because I knew that internalizing and letting things build and fester in the Habitat until they exploded was not going to be good for me, was not going to be good for the crew, and was not going to be good for the experience or for the science, by any stretch of the imagination. So it was very valuable to write those feelings down and acknowledge them and then move forward. And it was then funny to me, I was right back to form in the very next paragraph after talking about how grouchy I was. I talked about the Chiefs winning. I talked about seeing the Kansas City Royals in the national newspaper. And so I was kind of right back to where I normally am, which was really funny. And then something else I'll note that was also a surprise to me about journaling is that I felt a difference physically writing something down on paper versus using a computer. And I'm seeing people nod their heads, so other people probably already knew that. That was a discovery for me, at least. I can type a lot faster than I can write. And so when I'm typing, it's very easy to sort of word vomit at the computer, and you kind of have this, explosion of feelings on the page, but you're moving so quickly that you're not, or at least I guess compared to writing, you're not thinking about them and processing them in the same way. It's certainly good in some scenarios to just let everything out as quickly as you possibly can. But I found that writing it out, because it was slower and more intentional, I was having to think about the emotions physically as I was writing it down. And so by the time I finished writing my paragraph, whatever I was feeling, certainly if it was something negative, I had sort of come down from the edge of whatever that whatever that was. So writing something down versus typing it was very beneficial for me and was a surprise. This was the really funny journal entry that I wrote, and I'm just going to read it first and then we'll walk through the pictures. It was either, what I'm about to read is either a sign that I was very excited and very invested in everything that we were doing every day, or I just really, really missed being outside. So this journal entry was related to some microbial surface sampling analysis that we did. So we swabbed the surface, let it incubate for 2 weeks, and then did some analysis to figure out what was growing in our habitat. And so I wrote, there seem to be 2 types of growth, white misshapen blobs, some fuzzier than others, and, quote, green island colonies. These were fuzzy circular colonies that were green in the middle with a white ring. They looked like tropical islands with white sand beaches and forested mountainous interiors. I'll either never see islands the same way, or I'm too, and this was the part that was underlined, or I'm too romantic about fungus. Sounded like others hadn't seen much fungal growth, so maybe I got lucky. But this was fun, and I have high hopes for the subject sampling. So that just really struck me as hilarious, because I just spent, a couple minutes talking about how valuable journaling was for sort of the emotional processing and kind of the more intense part of it, but also I was writing about fungus and how I felt about doing daily activities and bacteria, and so that just was really amusing to me when I was flipping through. So this was one of the white blobs I was talking about that maybe looks like the coastline of northern Canada from the ISS. Here's some bacteria that looks like gummy cluster candy. So if you're looking for a reason to not eat candy and sugar, just think of this photograph and think of bacteria. And then this was the last one. You see here's some more, bacteria, fungus. I'm holding it. I'm really excited about it. Something's probably seriously wrong in my brain. And then in the upper right, you can see an island. It's Rarotonga Island as seen from space. So I wasn't wrong, but I don't know that anyone wants to obsess about that. So the other thing, and this is the next handful of charts, are the deeper part kind of into faith and spirituality and that sort of thing. Someone asked, or has asked me, how do you think overall this experience has changed you? How do you think your life is going to be different moving forward, having participated in something like this? And it's a very good question, and it's one that I'm not sure I have an answer to yet. And so with that kind of initial context, I'm going to take a step back. This is a fireplace, obviously. This was not in the habitat. Also, hopefully, obviously. This is something that Mary Coulter, she was an architect back in the 30s, I believe. She's a very well-known architect, especially in the American Southwest. And so she is the one who was designing lots of the lodges in Grand Canyon and then elsewhere in the American Southwest. And she put together this geologic fireplace. So in Bright Angel Lodge in the Grand Canyon, you can see the entirety of the history of the Grand Canyon in this one fireplace. So the rocks at the bottom are the oldest, and they were all, she decided exactly what layers she wanted. She had people go and carve out the rock, pack them up onto mules, and then bring them up to the top of the canyon to put in the lodge. And so the rock at the bottom is 1.7 billion year old Vishnu schist, and then you get progressively younger, and then at the very top, you have limestone from the Kaibab Formation, which is 270 million years old. So really old to really young, and you can see the entirety of the Grand Canyon just in this one fireplace. I read about this fireplace in a book during the experience in the habitat. My dad had loaned it to me. It's called Leave Only Footprints. It's written by Connor Knighton. It's an excellent book if you haven't read it. Connor Knighton went to all 63 U.S. national parks in a single calendar year and then wrote a book about that experience. And so in one of the chapters, he's talking about this fireplace and how it really helped him appreciate the Grand Canyon. And then he took a step back and he started thinking about people and personalities. And prior to his experience going to all of the different national parks, he felt that the sum total of a person, your personality, your experience, your existence as you are, is maybe like a soup. And so you're combining lots of different things. They're mixing together over time to create one sort of integrated whole. And it's hard to know exactly what went into the soup initially. You maybe don't see all the individual ingredients, but you have this one common thing at the end. And after seeing this, he sort of was proposing to the reader that instead of your personality being like soup, maybe we're more like a canyon, and we have these individual distinct layers. And so you can look back on your life and think about specific turning points or specific experiences or specific relationships and think, okay, this moment and this experience shaped me in some way and created a new layer to my personality that I'm now stacking on top of each other. So I thought that was kind of an interesting way to think about it. And I walked away thinking I slightly disagree because I think it's both. I think you have both the mixed and discrete layers. And so I think it's maybe more like an impressionist painting. My mom is an art history major, so hopefully she'll appreciate this part, and anything I get wrong about art is not her fault. So this is an impressionist painting, and you see, kind of at the very bottom, kind of in the upper right corner, there's a little snippet of green. And so there's maybe some green layer at the very bottom of this painting. And then on top of it, you have something that's pink, some sort of red and white mixture. On top of that, you have, since I talk with my hands, so you have the green here, you have a lot of pink, maybe up here. Down here, on top of that, maybe, you have kind of this darker red, this burgundy color. On top of that, you have this orange. And then on top of that, you start to have this orangey yellow and this yellow right here. So it's clear that there are distinct layers in this painting, but it's very hard to know where one layer ends and another begins. It's not, a clearly, sharply defined line. And even within a single layer, it's hard, things are mixed, right? This is pink, but it's presumably some sort of red, white, maybe something else. This darker down here is red and black, maybe some blue mixed in there. So you have individual layers, but each layer is also a mixture and a combination of different things all working together. And so it's easy to focus on the layers and lose sight of the big picture. And when you step back, this is what the painting actually looks like. We were just looking at this part right here, the center of a water lily right here. So when you take this step back, you see this whole picture, and it's even harder to know where one layer ends and the next begins. But clearly, they're all working together to create the sum total of the painting. And so that's kind of how I feel about the experience in general. And sort of who I am as a person. There are some things that have mixed together that have simmered together for the 35 years that I've been here on this earth. But I can also point back to very discrete moments and think, because I went to this thing and met this person, this series of things now happened in my life. And so coming back to the actual Hera part, how has this experience changed you? Even though it's been 8 months since I came back, which is crazy to think about, that it's already almost a year old, I still think I'm too close to the experience to sort of know longer term how it has changed me. It certainly reinforced some things for me, which is kind of the next part, kind of the lessons learned. So I don't maybe know exactly how it's influenced my life trajectory because I'm still living it, but there were certainly a number of things that I took away from the experience, and I'll try and wrap this up quickly so that we can get to questions. Number one, people are really resilient. You're a lot more resilient than you think you are. Everybody was very supportive of this experience, and reactions generally fell into one of two camps. People were either unequivocally super excited about it, oh my gosh, that's so great, you're going to have such a good time, that's wild, that's awesome. Or it was a little, you're doing what? That's crazy. You're going to sign up to live in this, like, in this tiny bubble, in this cage? Like, good for you, like, go enjoy it, but, like, I could never do something like that. And so, number one, I think you are more capable of things than you think you are. I'm not saying that everybody would enjoy this experience as much as I maybe did, but you're probably capable of something like this more than you think you are. So that's kind of the resiliency, my nod to Jurassic Park. Life finds a way, you find a way to rise to the occasion. Moving down, I mentioned this a little bit already, but there's I think it's a Buddhist proverb that says, be where your feet are. And so I actually have that written down on a Post-it note, well, multiple Post-it notes that I have, around my house and at work. Because again, it's very easy for me to what if and think about the future and all the things, that might happen if I do this or might not happen if I do something else. And so it's very easy to lose sight of where you are in the moment. And because this is something that I never could do again, I had to work very hard to remember to find joy, be present in the moment. And so that's something I hope to carry forward now that I'm out here. And then the last one is change. As I am getting older, I'm realizing that I always thought I loved change, and it turns out I don't. What I realize I like is what I call predictable change. So I don't know if that is even then change at all, but something like the changing of the seasons. That was a huge adjustment for me when I moved to Southern California from Kansas. I'm used to 4 distinct seasons, just as a very easy example. And so dealing with change and certainly dealing with things ending, especially if it's something good, like a vacation, like a relationship, that's hard. You don't want to let go of something that is good and is positive in your life. And so something that I was thinking about and trying to use as the Habitat experience was coming to an end is that for all of the other things I want to do in my life, this Habitat experience has to end. I can't go off and meet new people. I can't go off and explore the rest of the world. I can't go off and do all of these other things if I'm continuing to stay right here. And so learning to view endings as new beginnings for the next thing was something that I took away from the experience and was valuable for me as well. I should have mentioned this the first time I gave this talk, but sort of in the context of how does what we do matter more broadly. These are just kind of some snippets that I found just doing a quick search online of how HERA is being used today. So the results based on our experience last year, those results won't be published until probably next calendar year at the absolute earliest. Results being published in 2025 were based on missions over a year before mine. But you see here there's a website about the Human Research Roadmap at NASA, building risk matrices, based on what they've learned from the analogs, what are higher risk things for astronauts. You see journal publications. You see that NASA is engaging in workshops with international partners. In the middle one right here, ESA, that's the European Space Agency. So I mentioned this also in the first forum, and I guess I'll just kind of shift over to this next one, that what we were doing in HERA, even though it was at a NASA center, even though we were all American citizens, one of them is Ukrainian by birth and became a citizen back in 2017, I think. Even though everything was here in the States, the research that we're doing is not to benefit just American astronauts. It's to benefit anybody who is going into space. And so knowing that I am doing something that is helping advance the safety for all astronauts, for all people who go into space, not just, blonde people from California, was a very cool feeling to know that you're a part of something greater than yourself. One of the questions I got before this forum was, talk about or what things kind of affirmed or strengthened your faith when you were in the Habitat. And so I started to get into that with what I was just talking about, but the idea that even though you're disconnected from so many things, in certain ways I haven't ever felt as connected to the world, which is Sorry, that's probably my hair. Even though I was disconnected from the world, I also felt very connected in unexpected ways, which is kind of maybe a counterintuitive conclusion to draw from this experience. I mentioned this, I think, in passing. I don't see Marilyn. Is she here? Okay. So Marilyn gave a sermon right before I left. As it turned out, it was the 9th Sunday after Pentecost. It was July 21st last year, the day before I went to Houston. And she talked about this great prayer chant, and I can't remember exactly where it came from, so I will give her the credit knowing that she got it from someone else. And I don't remember all of the moves, but the prayer that she shared in that sermon is up there right here. It says, "Here I am as I am, wholly human in this world as it is, sacred, profane, ever connected in this wondrous, luminous web, ever abiding in the heart of God." So the thing that stuck out to me from the sermon in particular, and then stayed with me in the habitat, was the idea of this ever-connectedness in the wondrous, luminous web, which I just think is a very pretty way of thinking about how everything is connected. I read a John Muir quote in the habitat that talked about you can't, everything is hitched to everything else in the universe, and you can't tease out just one thing. It's connected to everything else. And so even though you're disconnected from the world, even though, I wasn't talking to friends and family as much as I normally do, I still felt very close with them. And because I wasn't as connected with other people, that was an opportunity for me to deepen my connectedness and my relationship with God. And so that was something that was very powerful for me, and something that I maybe didn't consciously expect or consciously think about before going into the habitat. I knew that I would lean on my faith. I knew that it would be something I would be grateful to have during the experience. But I guess, was surprised at how powerful it was for me and how important it was to still feel like I had that connection with something greater than myself. So that was a very powerful thing for me in the habitat. And then I'll go counterclockwise. So the learning curve that's on there, this experience was the first time in a long time that I have done something new that's related to what I do professionally. I'm a very curious person. I love doing new things. I like to think I try new things all the time. And if I'm not good at it, that's fine. I'm not the world's best jump roper. I can't play chess. There are lots of things that I can't do, and that's fine. And it doesn't bother me to not be good at those things. So it was very interesting to me when I wasn't, 100% perfect at something the very first time I tried it in the habitat. That was a new feeling for me to experience, because it felt like I should be good at it. I'm an aerospace engineer. I work at a NASA center. This shouldn't be that hard. You should know how to do all of this stuff. And so when it didn't immediately click, or I wasn't immediately, I don't need to be the best, but when I was immediately, like the very worst one at something, like that was something that was uncomfortable, that was unpleasant, that I didn't like feeling. And so kind of two aspects to that. The phrase I sort of came up with was the grace of the learning curve, and sort of relearning to be kind to myself, to give myself grace, to learn things, to give myself time, to be patient with myself. Because it's very easy out here. You do something once, you're not good at it, you don't like it. There are so many other things that you can do that it's easy to give up and move on to the next thing. But that's not an option in the habitat. There are these things that we have to do for science. I have to keep doing the same thing that I'm not good at over and over and over. And it turns out, as when you were a little kid, if you practice at something, you get better. And so that's a very basic lesson, and something that I thought I knew, but I kind of had to relearn that a little bit. And I was reminded of something that Coco Gauff said. Also, Coco Gauff, big women's tennis player. She's playing in the French Open. Her match is tomorrow, so no one's missing her right now. But she won the U.S. Open in 2023 as a teenager. She was either 18 or 19 at the time. And after she won, in her on-court interview, she talked about her faith a little bit, and she said this quote that's on the screen. She says, "I don't pray for results. I just ask that I get the strength to give it my all, and whatever happens, happens." And so that was something I had tried to remember even before the habitat, but then the habitat experience itself was a very good opportunity to much more actively remind myself of that. So I pretty quickly, as I was relearning the grace of the learning curve, I would, go into something that I wasn't sure I was going to be very good at, and I would sort of sit down and I would kind of take a deep breath and I'd say, all right, God, here we go again. Please help me to, focus, help me to give this my best effort, help me not to get frustrated. And so I wasn't praying, please help me to be perfect and 10 out of 10 get this thing right. That wasn't what I was doing. I was just trying to focus my energy to do my best in that moment, which was very valuable. And then this other picture, again, of Coco Gauff. The picture on the left, I'm actually using it to talk about another story, but that's actually of her after she won the U.S. Open, just so you know where it came from. So she was praying on the court, and then she talked about it. So that was really cool to see. And when I was trying to find this quote from her victory after the U.S. Open, I came across another one of hers that was meaningful for me. And this actually came up in just earlier this year after she lost in the finals of the 2025 Madrid Open to Sabalenka. She said a very long quote, but for me, the part that was very important was, she says, for me, it's important to share it being her faith, and let other people know it helps me. It could also help someone else. So I think we talk a lot in society about sharing all parts of your personality, being your authentic self. And maybe it's just a factor of where I work, but it sometimes feels like people mean share your authentic self as long as it's not your faith, as long as it's not your religion. And so for me, getting into what you think your call might be, we've talked about that in past forums. Something that I think feel more called to do is kind of trying to be an example of faith as an engineer, as a scientist. They are not mutually exclusive things. You can do both. You can believe in both. And so sharing that as an example of what it looks like today. I know we just had the first bell, and I promised we'd have questions. This is maybe the beginning of a next forum, I don't know, but talking about how faith and science can still work together. And so this was kind of probably one of the biggest takeaways for me from the whole experience, is this kind of duality of science and religion, and the fact that people see them as combative and butting heads, but I don't think that they have to. And so the book on the right is written by Barbara Brown Taylor. She's a former priest, Episcopalian priest down in the American Southeast, down in Georgia, and then Stephen Hawking. Everyone knows Stephen Hawking. And so they're both talking about different things, but they use a lot of similar words, which to me was very interesting. So in her book, Barbara Brown Taylor is talking, this book in particular is an essay about science and religion, but she says, our faith in an incarnational God will not allow us to ignore the physical world nor any of its nuances. So I thought that was very interesting. And then Stephen Hawking, in the foreword to A Brief History of Time, is saying that, as we continue to study physics, we're finding that disparate parts of physics are actually all working together. And so he says these dualities, different aspects of theoretical physics, are a strong indication that there is a complete unified theory of physics, but they also suggest that it may not be possible to express this in a single fundamental formulation. And then he goes on to essentially, like the example he then gives is, if you think about a map of the world, there isn't really one single map that adequately describes the whole world. And so you have to use multiple maps for different parts of the world to really understand how it works. And so my final thought that I will leave you with is that to really understand our lives and our reality, I don't think there's a single school of thought. I don't think it's just science. I don't think it's just religion. I think they can be thought of as different maps that you use together to overall understand who we are, why we're here, what we're doing. So there we go. So it was longer than I thought, sorry, but hopefully there's still questions. Or time for. One of these times I won't have any material and it'll just be questions, I promise.
With the time you spent awake, was there a diet that helped you through that time?
The question was there a diet that helped us in the time that we had to stay awake for those 36 hours? No, and I would even go further to say that for the period of time overnight that we were awake, we weren't allowed to eat at all. which was on purpose to stress us out even more. So I wish I'm someone who, if I have food, if I can keep eating and keep stuffing my face, I can stay up for quite a while. But they didn't let us eat food or have caffeine. So during the 36 hours, we had scheduled activities that we were doing, so it wasn't like you're trying just to, sit in your chair and read a book and not fall asleep at 4 o'clock in the morning. We were doing individual activities, we were doing team activities, and so it was a very regimented and structured, very structured period of time. Yes? Proposed date for humans to blast off to Mars. Good question. Depends who you ask, and there's just lots of uncertainty with lots of things in the world right now. I think at a high level, NASA's hoping humans to Mars sometime in the 2040s was kind of the last number I heard. Other questions? Yes?
Yes, I'm interested in how you manage your private time. Did you just have to take when you had the opportunity, or was it a scheduled time for that?
Yeah, so the question was, how did you handle private time? And so we wake up at 7 o'clock in the morning, you go to bed at 11 o'clock at night, and your day is scheduled down to 5-minute increments the entire day. And so that was a big adjustment for me. I'm not used to being told, I'm not used to being told exactly when I have to do something. In fact, I chafe under that. I don't like that. And so that was a big adjustment. And your private time, relaxing time, was essentially scheduled throughout the day. And there was a period of time when we were farther away from Earth, when we were approaching Mars, when we were on Mars, and then when we were coming home, where we had higher autonomy, and so we could schedule our own days. And so that was actually a really interesting exercise, because we talked amongst the crew, because there was I was responsible for scheduling everybody's day, 3 days out of the mission. And then, the other crew members did the same thing. And so we would talk amongst the crew and say, what kind of schedule preferences do you have? Do you like to work out in the morning? Do you like to work out in the afternoon? Do you want 15-minute breaks scattered throughout the day? Or would you rather have a 2-hour break in the afternoon so you can, watch a movie? And so we had those conversations to try and learn people's preferences. But I was never bored, I'll put it that way. I was very lucky. I was journaling all the time. I was writing. I took Legos. We had card games. So I was very busy even in my downtime. Other questions? No? Oh, yeah, Marcia?
Rather strange question. You look back to yourself at age 18, and you look at a crystal ball. What did you see then and is then now?
Ooh, that's a good question. So Marcia asked if I could, go back in time to my 18-year-old self, senior in high school, Sarah Elizabeth, and have a crystal ball and kind of look in the crystal ball and visualize my future. Is that what I'm living now? I don't. Oh gosh, that's a really hard question. I don't know that I had a specific plan per se. I don't think at 18 I thought, okay, here's my 10-year plan. I want to have achieved this. I think that the goal was to be an astronaut, is to be an astronaut. So still working on that even now, almost 18 years later, which is a lot of years now that I did that math in my head. So I think at 18, my goal was to be doing something that made me happy, that I found intellectually interesting. I wanted it to be connected to space. That's something I've always loved, something I've always enjoyed. So I don't know that I had a plan, and for not having a plan, I think where I am is pretty good. I think I'm pretty pleased with what has happened thus far, and who knows kind of what the next layer may, or what the next layer may be in my life, but hopefully it's as good as what has come so far.
Let's give Sarah Elizabeth a rousing Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
We could listen to you for hours and hours.
Well, I promise one time I'll give a forum and I won't have 45 minutes of material. There's just so much I always want to share. So,
All right. Thank you.
thank you all very much. Have a great morning and rest of your week.
Thank you so much. Oh my gosh.
You're welcome.
We could listen to you for hours.
Oh, well, thank you. That's very kind. Here I will. Oh, I forgot. I have stickers if you didn't get a sticker last time of our mission patch. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Fabulous.
I was a big nerd in high school. I don't know that much has changed. So please take all the stickers. And there's more underneath here too. Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you. I try to be. No. You show up in Houston and there they are. And you get to know each other. Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Rick.
Away or Mars for 20 years when they come back.
I think there are some plans to have one-way trips to send people to Mars. NASA certainly won't do that. NASA would only send humans to Mars if there's a plan to bring them home.
I'm so glad you're here.
Oh, well, thank you.
Give your parents our thanks,
I will.
because that's what gave you the baby.
I agree 100%.
Yeah.
I will.
We're thrilled, of course. But thank you.
Thank you.
I'm sure they're so proud of you. Well, I'm thinking how they selected all of you, because 99% of us could not go through what you did. We would not sit still for 2 hours. You know what I mean? I was going to 100%. So did they watch you? Did they interview you? Go through various times? They obviously looked at your career, and then they had a big group and then a smaller group and a smaller group. Just the whole selection process, how they ended up. It was with successful results. You all lasted. You all made it through it. Nobody went crazy as far as that.
No one did. We're all still friends.
Right.
It's a good question. So initially, I submitted a resume through a really sketchy website, and it was funny. I had completed most of that process, but I hadn't fully finished it, and so I was getting an email every day for months. Finish your application. Finish your application. Finish your application. And I got so annoyed at the emails that finally I was like, fine, I'll finish the application just to get it out of the way. Exactly. And then they said, oh, okay, great. Here's some more forms and questionnaires to fill out. They started asking about my health history. I had some blood work done. I had a virtual interview that led to an on-site interview.
So this went on over a several months period?
Yes. Yeah. So I submitted the application in January. I had my on-site interview mid-April, and then found out, and I was the second to last person they interviewed in person at JSC, and so that period of time had been about a month, I think. And then I found out that I'd been selected mid-May. So early January to mid-May was that. But it's interesting because it's kind of a rolling application process.
One stage. Do you know if they initially tended just to have 4 people, or maybe they wanted more, or they found who they liked?